Senator Marshall.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brunner, I'll start with you. Bristol Myers makes this new miracle drug, Eliquis, relatively a miracle drug. And when I was in residency treating patients, I was using Coumadin, heparin, and then Coumadin. It might take 3 or 4 days to get someone heparinized, and then we switch them over to Coumadin. They might be in the hospital for 10 or 14 days. So in its own right, Eliquis, saves money. It saves that length in the hospital and prevents hospitalizations as well. So I want to point that out. And as we talk about rationing care, we've discussed how we're rationing care in foreign countries. But I want you to speak about rationing care in this country. How do PBMs ration care when they take a drug like Eliquis and don't allow it on their formulary? Does that ever happen?
Senator, I'm glad you raised that point. We have had absolutely that case happen on multiple drugs. We've had it happen on Eliquis. We've had it happen where when we have not been able to reach an agreement with an intermediary on a rebate, that they've taken Eliquis off of formulary. And when that happens, those patients no longer have access to Eliquis, and they have to go on to another branded, or in many cases, they may go on to warfarin, as you say. Yeah. Eliquis is the #1 product in the oral anticoagulant space.
Okay. So I'm going to catch. So they have to go back to warfarin, the Coumadin, the drug that I was using in medical school in the 1980s, a drug with significant complications, a hassle factor. The patient has to go get blood testing done, maybe twice a week as well. But with your drug, one of the miracle parts of it is A, they don't bleed into their brains anymore, and two, they don't have to go get their blood testing done once a week as well. So it's a huge amount of innovation. And it amazes me how much power these PBMs have obtained. Let's go to Mr. Davis next. I want to talk about delinking. And you have, at the time, a miracle drug of your own to treat diabetes with. There's a list price. How much of that, what percentage of that list price does typically Merck get at the end of the day?
So, Senator, if you look at Januvia, which is the drug you were speaking to, the list price is $6,900
per year for a year.
Per year for Merck. We recognize $690 on that drug per year.
So of the list price, you're only getting 10%.
It's a 90% discount.
90% discount. Where does the rest of that money go?
Into the middlemen, into the system as a whole.
If we had the time and the energy and a chalkboard, would you be able to explain to me and show me all the little places that goes?
I could, but I think you appreciate it is highly complex, and so complex that at times even learned people who play in the space can't understand.
Well, certainly I can't explain it. And that's my point, is it's so non-transparent. We don't know where this money is going, but certainly we know that the pharmacy benefit managers are taking 50 to 75 cents of that dollar, and you're only getting 10% of it. I would like to know where the rest of it goes. Then I'll go back to Mr. Brunner. Similarly, with your drug, with Eliquis, what percent of that list price do you think that you all are taking home?
Senator, it's a relatively smaller percentage. As I mentioned before, we've paid over the last 5 years about $100 billion in rebates and discounts, and the majority of that go to one product, and that's Eliquis.
Okay. Go back to Mr. Davis. Let's talk about, you all have an antiviral drug that's been approved. How many drugs did you go down when COVID hit? You were trying to develop multiple drugs. How many have made it across the finish line? What did you spend on R&D as you look at those all together?
Yeah, so when the COVID situation hit, we drove 2 or 4 key programs: 2 in vaccines, 2 in antivirals. Only one of those succeeded, which is the drug Lagevrio. The total spend across those 4 programs is a little over $2.5 billion.
So you spent $2.5 billion. You got one across the finish line, an antiviral. Is that being used in the United States?
Very little. It has emergency use authorization. It never got to full approval, and so we're actually seeing it being used much more outside the United States.
So in actuality, you spent $2.5 billion and got none of significant market share in the United States despite that. Mr. Watto, I'll talk to you for a second. In my 25 years taking care of patients, we were always able to find a solution for their drugs that they needed. 340B programs, rebates, There's always exceptions to the rules, but what type of efforts does J&J make to work with 340B programs and to help some of these people that need help?
Thank you, sir. We care deeply about patient affordability, but also we care about the sustainability of the rural hospitals and small hospitals that take care of patients that are underserved. So we believe that the 340B program, it's an important program to support those hospitals, and we are fully looking forward to collaborate with them in any way we can to support patient access on those hospitals.
And I'm going to point out once again, it's just not rural hospitals, it's our community health centers are taking great advantage of the 340B program as well, trying to make sure that every patient in America has access to primary care, true affordable access to primary care, plus having access to affordable drugs as well. I might make a couple quick points. The people of Kansas sent me here to save Medicare. To save Medicare, I need a miracle drug to treat Alzheimer's. It seems to me that Americans bear the burden of most of the R&D in this world, and other countries benefit from it. And that impacts the price in many ways as well. Mr. Davis, am I wrong? Why does it feel like to me that Americans are feeling most of the brunt of the R&D cost, or is that not accurate? I don't know.
Well, I think, Senator, it gets down to, as you look across the globe, different markets, and I appreciate what the U.S. does. I think the U.S. favors innovation. It values it. It values access for our patients, fast access, most access. Many markets around the world don't do that. What they focus on more is their budget and how do they meet those budget needs, and we appreciate the budgetary constraints that everyone faces. But as a result of that, often patients aren't getting access to meds. They don't get them as fast, which we've commented on today, and it's harder to see how you can support the innovation we need to do in that situation.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin. Senator Casey.
Thanks so much, Senator Baldwin, for allowing me to jump ahead. Mr. Chairman, thanks for the hearing. I want to start with a sense that I have back home. When I talk to people in Pennsylvania, and a lot of your companies have a lot of interest in Pennsylvania, I hear over and over again, this problem, the cost of prescription drugs, it's like a bag of heavy rocks. People have been carrying this around on their shoulders every day, year after year, and they're tired of it. And they don't believe that any player in this is doing enough. I think most Pennsylvanians are happy that I could vote for a bill in 2022 that allowed Medicare to negotiate for lower prescription drug costs, and that we could cap the cost of insulin, $35 a month for Medicare Part D beneficiaries. They're happy that we could cap the out-of-pocket costs. That'll go into effect about a year from now. But they're not happy. They're not satisfied that even Congress is doing enough, House or Senate or either party. But they're certainly not happy with the level of work that you've put into this. Look, I hear all this talk about rebates and cost reductions you're trying to put in place, but it's not cutting back home. And when I talk to people that see what PBMs are doing, they know that they're not meeting the obligation that they would expect them to. So there's no question that your companies and big pharmaceutical companies are playing a role in this. You bear a measure of responsibility in this. And I wanted to ask you a couple questions about that. First and foremost, tell me what concrete steps, very specific steps, that each of you are taking and your companies are taking to make sure that we can get these costs down. And even by way of repetition, you may have already said it, not worried about you repeating yourself, but we need to know specifically what you're doing to lowering costs so that no one, especially someone who needs a life-saving intervention, a life-saving treatment, is going to be denied that solely because of cost. And I'll start on the left, Mr. Duato, going left to right.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. We absolutely want to be part of the solution. We understand that copay obligations for U.S. patients are burdensome, and it does create health inequities. What are we doing for that? We have a very extensive patient assistance program that for commercial patients enables them to be able to pay low copays, $5 to $15 per month. We supported more than 1 million patients in 2022 with our copay assistance programs. If a patient is underinsured or not insured, we provide free drug. We gave $3.9 billion in free drug in 2022. But I think we can do more, and we can work together in order to lower out-of-pocket costs for patients, even in Medicare, as you mentioned, because that's a real need that we are committed, all our employees are committed, in order to make sure that our medicines get to the patients that they deserve it.
Mr. Davis?
Well, Senator, very much like J&J, we have tiered levels of patient assistance programs because we want to make sure that patients who need our drugs can access them. If you have insurance, but you fall below certain means where you're not able to handle your copay, we will give copay assistance to those patients through a program we run. If you're someone who doesn't have insurance, is not able to qualify for government programs, we have a patient assistance program that basically provides the drugs for free. So we are very much focused on this and making sure that we can do everything we can, and we're investing a lot of money on it. But something I'd like to add, because I think it's important to the discussion, we're focusing on prices today, but we also need to think about innovation as a way to fix the problem. And something we're focusing on as a company is a new technology called macrocyclic peptides that allow us to potentially take what historically has been large molecules, difficult to make, expensive drugs, difficult to deliver, and we're starting to show the capability to convert those into cheaper small molecule forms, oral forms. If we're able to do that, we have one in late stage development now called an oral PCSK9, which is for heart disease, but we're looking to do that for others. We're investing millions, billions behind that effort. So I think we need to also think about how can innovation solve the problem. We need to address the price challenges today. We have to lower out-of-pocket costs, but innovation, like, ultimately is what's going to help us fix this.
Sure.
Senator, maybe I would highlight three things. First, we obviously have a very robust, on the commercial side, copay assistance program that brings out-of-pocket costs down in many cases for certainly our oral oncologics, for example, almost to zero. They're complex at times, so we are working very hard to make those more universally available. That's step one. Step two, we would like to work with this Congress to find ways in which we could apply the same sort of programs in Medicare. There's some complexities. We want to make sure we're not diverting from the use of generics, for example, but we think there are potential ways that we could do that, and we would love to explore those opportunities with Congress to bring out-of-pocket costs down for Medicare patients. The second thing I would say is we are looking at doing more innovative work, innovative contracting work, where we can, for example, if our drug works, we get paid. If it doesn't work, we get paid less, and in some cases maybe even not get paid at all. There are technicalities in the U.S. that prohibit us from doing that more in the U.S. We want to work to get those removed. The third thing, just building on what Rob was saying, is we do believe that innovation plays a role here. Cellular therapy, while not gene therapy per the previous question, those are expensive therapies. We have got to bring those costs down, and the way we will do that is we will innovate to the next generation, which hopefully is way less complex than what I described previously.
Well, I'll be submitting some more follow-up questions for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Paul.
I'm not an apologist for Big Pharma. In fact, when corporations manipulate government to their advantage, crony capitalism, I'm an unfettered critic. But in defense of capitalism, I am a consistent, unapologetic advocate. Milton Friedman once wrote that if you want to create a shortage of tomatoes, just pass a law that retailers can't sell tomatoes for more than 2 cents. Instantly, you'll have a tomato shortage. I might also add that that's true of prescription drugs. Virtually every shortage of drugs that we've seen in the last few years involves price controls that drive out production of the drug. One reason the United States leads in pharmaceutical innovation is because while the U.S. adhered to a more market-based pricing and rewarded innovators, Europe adopted stringent price controls in the 1980s and 90s. It's not surprising that we lead the world in innovation and Europe does not. But unfortunately, this committee and this hearing is not here to celebrate American success. Instead, the majority drags us to conduct a show trial to harangue companies challenging the Inflation Reduction Act's price controls in court. They've simply brought forward people who question their partisan legislation. 10 years ago, the 5-year survival rate for patients diagnosed with advanced lung cancer was 5%. Terrible. Since Merck introduced the cancer drug Keytruda in 2014, the survival rate has grown nearly fourfold, 5% to 20%. We should be celebrating that instead of castigating people and telling them how to run their business and why are you buying your stock back? I have a friend with a genetic predisposition to cancer. He's alive today because of Keytruda. We should be celebrating that. Johnson & Johnson's Remicade was the first monoclonal antibody approved for treating chronic conditions like Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis. Since its approval, Remicade has revolutionized treatments for inflammatory disease, made remission a reality for patients with debilitating conditions, and paved the way for development of other autoimmune treatments. When I began in medicine, virtually all patients with rheumatoid arthritis you could see from a distance had crippling, disfiguring arthritis in their hands. Now today it's rarely seen because of the advances of American companies under an American system that allowed profit to occur. In 1987, Merck pledged to donate the entire stock of its drug ivermectin to those suffering from river blindness. Nearly 37 years later, ivermectin donation program treats 300 million people annually with over 11 billion treatments shipped to endemic countries. This is charity, my friends, from capitalism. You don't get this under socialism because there is no profit under socialism. They have no money to give. They make extraordinary profits. Do they keep some up for their investors? Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. But they also have some left over for charity, and you don't get that under socialism. Because of Merck's donations, 7 countries eradicated the transmission of the #1 cause of blindness in the world. Pharmaceutical innovation has improved cancer rates, cured hepatitis C, doubled the lifespan of patients living with cystic fibrosis. It goes on and on. We've tried price controls in general here. We did it in the 1970s under a Republican president, under Nixon. It was a disaster, and it led to lines at the gas pump. It was an ultimate disaster. A study at the University of Chicago found that 254 fewer drug approvals over the course of 18 years would happen under price controls. Under communism, they knew this. Socialism, communism, under the economic system of socialism. From price controls, it became a running joke. In Poland, during the Soviet era, there was a story of the guy went to the store. He was looking for eggs, and he asked the clerk, "Is this the store with no eggs?" And they said, "No, this is the store with no toilet paper. The store with no eggs is across the street." That's the story of socialism. That's the story of price controls. Scarcity and empty shelves are the inevitable result of price controls. Those who understand and appreciate capitalism do not need a show trial to dupe them into forgetting that price controls have never worked and never will. Let's get back to profitability. I don't think you guys did a very good job on answering this. Did you add into your estimate of whether it's profitable in Canada, whether or not it costs you $2.6 billion on average to develop it? You're talking about manufacturing costs. You're talking about how much it costs to make Keytruda and how much you sell it for, say you have a profit in Canada. Do you think it would still be a profit, Mr. Davis, if you added in all the R&D, the $2.6 billion to get it through this system, the apparatus of your company, and you divided all of that out for profitability? Would it still be profitable in most of these other countries?
I have not done that analysis, but I would say that the profitability would be marginal at best.
Do you think you'd have as much R&D if the whole world were Canada? Do you think you'd be developing dozens of new drugs every year if the whole world were Canada?
No, I do not.
So this is what we're arguing against. You know, sure, you can make it for pennies now, but it didn't start that way. And then people are like, oh my, it costs so much in the beginning. That's capitalism. That's the way it works in capitalism. Joseph Schumpeter talked about this, and he said, this is an old anecdote, but he said, the miracle of capitalism is not that queens have silk stockings, but that factory girls ultimately do. But in the beginning, only the queen has silk stockings. Rich people get stuff in the beginning. Rich people drive the innovation. The first calculators that came out, $300 for adding, subtracting, and dividing machine. Now they're like pennies or free. But you have to allow the price to be higher in the beginning, and the market brings it down as you have more widespread market. That's capitalism. We don't know what the correct price is. There is no moral price. There is no moral amount of profit. There is no business of any of y'all telling them how much stock to buy back. Their job is to make a profit. It's actually against the law for them not to maximize their profit. For you to sit in judgment of how much profit they should make and how they should run their companies, you know nothing of running companies. You know, nobody up here, maybe some, but almost nobody up here has run big companies, billion-dollar companies. And you presume somehow to say you're going to tell these people how to run their company. List price versus net price. List price means absolutely nothing. I charged $1,800 for cataract surgery. The government paid me $600. 2/3 of it, nobody stole that. It disappeared because it never existed. So if I billed $1 million in charges, I really was only billing $300,000 because that's what I was getting paid. But because of the confusing nature of the system, the list price is much different than the net. But to quote list price and then compare it to net price in other countries is completely and profoundly unfair. The list price means absolutely nothing. All of these fallacies need to be addressed before we begin haranguing American CEOs. Thank you.